The battlefield near the Whispering Wood was still slick with blood and rain, the banners of House Stark billowing in victory. Yet amidst the celebration, a different kind of silence had settled over Robb Stark's war camp, the kind that hung like a blade waiting to drop. They had captured a lion, but not the one they had aimed for. Lord Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, Hand of the King, feared tactician of 100 battles, now sat bound, gagged, and bloodied in a Stark tent. The man who commanded tens of thousands, whose name made lesser lords tremble, was stripped of his armor and dignity, guarded by Northmen who stared at him like a beast in a cage. It wasn't supposed to go this way. The plan had been to lure Jaime Lannister into the trap, to take the Kingslayer and use him as leverage. Instead, it was Tywin himself who had ridden ahead, seeking to personally break the Stark lines with a surprise charge. That arrogance, that Lannister pride, had been his undoing. Robb stood outside the tent, jaw-clenched, hand resting on the pommel of his sword. His mother, Catelyn, approached with measured steps. "You look like a boy who's just caught a bear instead of a rabbit," she said quietly. "I wanted Jaime," Robb replied, barely keeping the tension from his voice. "Not this." Catelyn glanced toward the tent. "This may be more valuable than you realize." Robb wasn't so sure. Jaime was reckless and hated but predictable. Tywin was something else. A man who didn't need a sword in hand to destroy you, his mind was the weapon. Holding him felt like grasping wildfire. Back in King's Landing, the ripple of news hit like a wave crashing through stone. Cersei Lannister's cup slipped from her hand when the Raven arrived, wine staining the floor like blood. She stared at the scroll, her breath caught in her throat. Tywin, her father, her protector, the true power behind the Iron Throne, had been taken prisoner by the very boy king she had dismissed as green and foolish. Tyrion read the letter over her shoulder, and for once he was silent. The implications were vast and immediate. Without Tywin, the Lannisters' iron grip on the war was slipping. Joffrey, her insufferable son, would become even harder to control. The small council would start to fracture. And Stannis Baratheon was already marching. "What will you do?" Tyrion asked her carefully. "What can I do?" Cersei hissed. "If Robb Stark is smart, he'll use father like a dragon's egg, valuable, dangerous, and ready to explode." Back in the Northmen's camp, the question of what to do with Tywin split the lords like a sword through meat. "Execute him," Great John Umber snarled. "He's worth more dead than breathing. Cut the head off the lion and the rest scatter." "No," Catelyn said firmly. "He's worth more alive. With Tywin as prisoner, we can demand terms, gold, hostages, even territory." Robb said nothing for a long time. In truth, the idea of killing Tywin Lannister held a cold allure. This was the man who had burned the Riverlands, who had sent Gregor Clegane to pillage and rape innocent villages. The man responsible for countless deaths under his banner. But Robb wasn't just a Stark, he was trying to be a king. And kings made decisions not out of vengeance, but strategy. Then there was another voice, quiet but urgent, from Maester Luwin, who had been sent to assist with diplomacy. "Remember, my lord. Tywin's capture will not weaken the Lannisters forever. If anything, it may harden them. Cersei is dangerous when cornered, Joffrey unpredictable. You've set the lioness loose." Robb nodded grimly. He knew this wasn't a victory. It was a turning point, a dangerous one. Inside the tent, Tywin sat in silence, his expression unreadable. He didn't beg, he didn't speak. But his eyes, cold and calculating, never left the flaps of the tent. He wasn't broken. He was planning, plotting, waiting. The cold winds howled outside the tent, but inside the War Council, things were far more heated. Robb Stark sat at the head of the table, surrounded by bannermen with fur-lined cloaks and blood still crusted on their armor. The capture of Tywin Lannister had changed the entire atmosphere of the war. For once, the lords weren't just shouting for vengeance. They were calculating, ambitious. Each one saw a different prize in Tywin's capture. "He's the Lord of Casterly Rock," said Lord Rickard Karstark, his face stern. "With him in chains, his gold is useless, his armies without guidance. We strike now and crush them while they're leaderless. But do we dare leave him breathing behind us?" Umber barked. "What happens when he's ransomed back to his family? You think Cersei or that mad boy Joffrey won't use him like a whip on our backs?" "He is not a sword," Catelyn said, her voice sharp. "He is a man, and men can be used, traded, bent." All eyes turned to Robb, who had remained quiet, watching them all like a direwolf in tall grass. "We don't kill him," Robb finally said. "Not yet. If we do, they'll never bargain. Not for Sansa, not for Arya. This is leverage. We use it wisely." A few lords grumbled under their breath. Catelyn gave him a quiet, approving nod, but Karstark's glare lingered. His hatred for the Lannisters was personal. He had lost sons at their hands. Meanwhile, Tywin Lannister remained a shadow in their camp, silent still, speaking to no one. He refused food for the first day, then began to eat sparingly, always with dignity, as if the ropes binding his wrists were beneath him. When the guards mocked him, he didn't respond. When they asked questions, he said nothing. But the way he watched, the way he listened, it unsettled even hardened warriors. On the third day, Catelyn entered the tent. "You know why I'm here," she said. Tywin looked up slowly. "I know many things," he said finally. His voice was hoarse but calm, the same tone he used to order death. "We have your life in our hands," Catelyn continued. "And your family has ours if we're to end this war." "There is no ending it," Tywin interrupted coldly. "Not while you stand behind your boy king playing queen in the mud. You think this is balance, that because you hold me the realm trembles. No, Lady Stark, the realm will burn. My son sits on the throne. My daughter whispers in the king's ear, and the gold flows no matter where I sit." Catelyn's hands tightened at her sides. "That gold cannot buy your way out of here, not unless you give us something worth it." Tywin stared at her for a long time, then offered a slight, mirthless smile. "You want the Kingslayer?" He flinched at the name, but nodded. "I can offer him," Tywin said, "but I offer nothing for free." Catelyn leaned forward. "And what would you ask Tywin Lannister?" He didn't hesitate. "My freedom, my return to Casterly Rock, safe passage for my remaining soldiers, and no retaliation when I resume my title." Catelyn felt the fury rise in her chest. "You expect peace in return for war." "I expect what I always expect," Tywin said, leaning forward slightly. "Victory." In King's Landing, chaos brewed beneath the gilded walls of the Red Keep. With Tywin gone, the balance of power had shifted, and not for the better. Cersei tried to hide her panic behind a mask of arrogance. She screamed at the small council, dismissed them one by one, and sought to place her own puppets in key roles. But every decision felt like grasping at sand. Joffrey was uncontrollable, declaring he would personally ride to battle and kill the young wolf with his own hands. Tyrion, for once, had leverage. He stepped into the council chamber with a confident smile and held up the Raven Scroll from the north. "They want to trade father for Jaime." Cersei looked up from her wine, eyes bloodshot. "It's a trick." "Perhaps," Tyrion said, "but if it's not and you refuse, they'll execute him. And then where are we?" "Still ruling," she said bitterly. "With Joffrey as king and no leash," Tyrion raised a brow. "You'd risk father's life on that gamble." There was a silence. He stepped closer. "Let me go, let me negotiate. You know he'd send me if the roles were reversed." Cersei laughed bitterly. "He wouldn't send you to fetch a chamber pot." "Perhaps, but I'm all you've got." And for once, she knew it. Back in the Stark camp, the debate raged on. Some wanted to execute Tywin publicly. Others wanted to trade him for both Jaime and the girls. A few suggested holding him until the war ended, a permanent hostage. But Robb Stark stood at the center of it all, the weight of kingship heavier than ever. He looked over the tent where Tywin was held and wondered. Was keeping the lion alive the same as letting the wolf starve? The arrival of Tyrion Lannister in the north was met with tension so thick it could choke a raven mid-flight. He rode into the Stark camp under a banner of parley, unarmed, escorted by a small contingent of guards bearing no weapons and even fewer smiles. The air was cold, biting, but it was nothing compared to the stares he received. Every northerner looked at him as if he were a cockroach scuttling across their supper table. He dismounted with theatrical flair and a crooked smile, brushing the snow from his shoulders. "Well," he said dryly, "it's always a pleasure to be surrounded by people who clearly want me dead." They led him directly to Robb's war tent. Inside, Catelyn Stark stood beside her son, her eyes filled with old suspicion. She remembered Tyrion from Winterfell, and more importantly, from the Vale where she had once taken him prisoner. Tyrion remembered, too. His smile thinned. "Lady Stark." "Lord Stark, or King Stark now, is it? Congratulations." "I'd say the crown suits you better than it did Renly." Robb said nothing. He watched the dwarf the way one might watch a spider. Catelyn was less patient. "Say what you came to say, Lannister." Tyrion's eyes flicked to the two guards behind them, then back. "I've come to discuss an exchange, my father, for my brother." Robb stepped forward, voice cold and even. "Do you speak for King Joffrey?" Tyrion smiled sadly. "I speak for House Lannister." Which, let's be honest, is the only house that matters in King's Landing. Catelyn's fingers twitched near her belt. She hadn't forgotten what the Lannisters had taken from them. "End, Sansa, Arya, their peace, their honor." "You offer us Jaime," she said flatly. "And what else?" Tyrion cocked his head. "What more do you want?" Our daughters, she snapped. Tyrion flinched, and for once he didn't have a clever retort. Sansa is alive, unharmed, well, mostly. She's under my protection. And Arya? Robb asked. There was a pause. Arya has slipped away, vanished. No one knows where she is. Silence filled the tent like smoke. I'm not here to lie, Tyrion said quietly. I'm here to end this before too many more die. You hold our father, we hold your sister's husband. A trade can be made. Robb stepped forward. What happens after the trade? You go back to your throne and Joffrey kills whoever he wants. Tyrion's face darkened. You think I trust him? I don't. I know he's a spoiled little monster, but I can contain him, and with father free, perhaps we can find something resembling peace. Catelyn's voice was like frost on steel. Peace died when En's head hit the dirt. Tyrion took a breath. Then let me offer you something more, not just Jaime, gold, food, protection for your lands, a formal recognition of northern independence. Robb and Catelyn looked at him sharply. You do that? Robb asked. No, Tyrion said, but I'd make father do it. He wants to win. You think pride matters more to him than power. It was a gamble. Tyrion knew it. He was betting that Tywin, ruthless, pragmatic Tywin, would rather let the North go than lose everything. But not everyone in the camp agreed. That night, as the fire cracked in the war tent, Lord Rickard Karstark stormed in. His eyes were bloodshot, his fists clenched. You would bargain with these devils. You would trade gold and words for justice. He roared, My sons are dead. A line is gone, and still you treat these vipers like equals. Robb stood firm. We are not doing this for vengeance, my lord. No, Karstark spat. You're doing it for weakness. He stormed out, but the damage was done. Doubt had been planted. Robb turned to his mother uncertain. She had seen this before, how wars fractured from within. Later that night, in the shadows of the camp, Rickard Karstark entered the guarded tent where Tywin Lannister was held. The guards stood aside, bribed, convinced. Perhaps just tired. Karstark stepped inside with a blade at his side, breathing heavily. Tywin looked up at him with those cold, dead lion eyes. I should gut you where you sit, Karstark hissed. For every son I'll never see again. Tywin didn't blink, then do it. Karstark stepped closer, hand trembling. But know this, Tywin whispered. The moment you do, your king loses everything, and I become a martyr. Karstark's hand faltered, then footsteps. Catelyn Stark entered the tent. Her voice was sharp as a blade. Get out. Karstark glared at her, then at Tywin, and left in silence. Tywin looked up at her. You can't hold a lion by the tail forever, Lady Stark. Catelyn didn't flinch. No, but sometimes you can make it bleed. Snow fell thicker now, burying the Stark camp in a quiet that felt less like peace and more like the calm before a slaughter. Within the command tent, the final terms of the exchange were being written with hands as tense as they were trembling. Tyrion sat across from Robb and Catelyn, a goblet of northern wine untouched before him. A raven was being prepared to fly to King's Landing, with demands that would make even Tywin Lannister sweat. The trade on parchment looked simple. Jaime Lannister and Sansa Stark would be released immediately. In return, Tywin Lannister would be escorted unharmed to Lannister-controlled lands. The North would be granted non-aggression terms, at least for the winter, but nothing in Westeros was ever simple. You really think he'll agree to this? Robb asked, eyes sharp. Tyrion didn't answer right away. He'll agree because he must. But don't expect gratitude, expect retribution. Robb stood and turned to his bannermen. Then we prepare as if war is coming anyway. Because it is, Catelyn said, one way or another. In King's Landing, the Raven arrived with the weight of a sword in the back. Cersei read the message in the dark of her chambers, alone. She reread it 3 times, her lips forming silent curses. Every word felt like salt on an open wound. They wanted her twin for her father. They wanted her daughter back in the North. And worst of all, they wanted her to look weak. She crumpled the scroll, then burned it. But she didn't stop it, not because of mercy, because of fear. Tyrion had been right. Without Tywin, the realm was slipping through her fingers. The lords were restless. The Tyrells, vultures in silk, had begun making suggestions that stung of threats. And Joffrey, gods help them all, he had threatened to execute peasants for not cheering loud enough at court. So she sent Jaime, bound and guarded, toward the Riverlands. But not alone. A shadow rode beside him, Sir Meryn Trant and 5 of the Gold Cloaks, not to protect him, but to ensure Sansa Stark never left the capital alive. In the north, the Stark camp prepared for the handoff. A neutral ground was chosen, a valley along the Blackwater Rush, wide and barren. No hills, no trees, no room for tricks. Tywin Lannister was dressed in a clean cloak, his face shaved, his hair trimmed. He looked every bit the lord he was, even in chains. He spoke to no one, not even Tyrion, who visited him once before departure. "I've done my part," Tyrion said. "You'll be free by nightfall." Tywin met his son's eyes and spoke for the first time in days. "You should have let them kill me." Tyrion blinked. "That's a bit dramatic even for you." "No," Tywin said. "If you think for 1 second this ends with peace, you're a fool. They'll never stop until our house falls, and you've just handed them the only thing that keeps the wolves at bay." "Then prove me wrong," Tyrion snapped. "Do something you've never done. Keep your sword sheathed." Tywin only smiled, a thin, cruel thing. Even a sheathed sword cuts if you press it hard enough. The exchange day dawned gray and quiet. Both sides arrived at opposite ends of the field. On one side, the Starks with Tywin, a man bound but unbent. On the other, the gold cloaks with Jaime, grinning, battered, unarmed. No Sansa. Robb's eyes scanned the arriving group, his gut tightening. "They were supposed to bring my sister." Tyrion rode up beside the gold cloaks, confused. "Where is she?" he demanded. Sir Meryn Trant sneered. "The girl was unavailable. Orders from the Queen." Tyrion's face went pale. "You were never going to bring her, were you?" Trant shrugged. "No one said we had to give you everything." Tyrion turned to Robb, but the young wolf was already moving. "If my sister isn't here," Robb called out loud and cold, "there is no trade." The wind howled, the field suddenly felt like the edge of a grave. Tywin said nothing. His eyes, however, gleamed because he saw it, the fracture, the betrayal, the blood about to be spilled. And then it happened. Rickard Karstark stepped forward, sword in hand. He didn't speak. He just drove his blade into Tywin Lannister's chest. Gasps, shouts, screams. Blood spilled from Tywin's mouth as he collapsed, coughing, not a roar, not a shout. Just silence. The lion bled out in snow and mud. Robb lunged forward. No, but it was too late. On the other side, Jaime's scream was drowned by the roar of horses. The gold cloaks turned, not back to King's Landing, toward the Starks. "Ambush!" shouted Robb. Swords clashed, arrows flew. Tyrion was nearly trampled as chaos erupted. Robb tried to reach Jaime to salvage something, anything, but it was over. The Lannisters didn't want peace. They wanted revenge. And now Tywin was dead. The storm after Tywin Lannister's death wasn't measured in rain or thunder. It came in steel, fire, and betrayal. Robb Stark stood at the edge of the battlefield, his boots soaked in blood-soaked snow, his sword still warm from the clash. Around him lay the dead, both Lannister and Northmen alike, a slaughter sparked by one man's blade. Rickard Karstark had disappeared in the chaos, fled into the trees with a handful of his loyal men. But his betrayal hung heavy in the air, fouler than any corpse. "What have we done?" Robb whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of it all. Tyrion stood nearby, face cut, armor dented, his eyes haunted. "You killed him." "I didn't order this," Robb said. "No," Tyrion replied, "but he's dead all the same." Catelyn arrived then, her dress torn and her face ash-gray. "Where is Jaime?" "Gone," Robb muttered. "They took him during the fight. He's back with his people." Catelyn's breath hitched. "And Sansa?" "Still a prisoner," Tyrion said quietly. "She may never be freed now." There was a long silence. Tyrion looked at Robb. "You've just turned this war into a crusade." News of Tywin Lannister's death spread faster than wildfire. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister collapsed when she heard the news, not in front of the court, but in the solitude of her chambers, where even her pride couldn't shield her. Her father, the one constant in her life, the only man she truly feared, was gone. Joffrey found it amusing. "Serves him right," he chuckled. "Always telling me what not to do." Cersei slapped him so hard he stumbled. "You killed him," she hissed. "You and your damned orders." "I did nothing." He barked, red-faced. "No, you never do," she snapped. "And now everything will fall." She knew. Without Tywin, House Lannister was gold without a sword, power without strategy. They still had the throne, but the realm would smell weakness and pounce. In the north, things unraveled quickly. Karstark's betrayal was not an isolated act. It lit a spark that ignited division. Some saw him as a madman. Others saw him as a hero who avenged the death of his sons. Robb called a council, his voice grim. "We cannot excuse this. We cannot let one man's vengeance cost us everything." "But he's not just one man," Great John Umber warned. "He's a Bannerlord, and he speaks for many." Catelyn stood beside her son. "If you allow this, no lord will ever follow your word again." Robb didn't want to execute Karstark. Gods knew he'd lost enough allies, but honor demanded justice, and justice meant blood. The search began. It took 3 days to track down Karstark and his men. They were found in the ruins of an old farmhouse, camped and waiting for reprisal. Karstark didn't resist. He stood proudly as he was dragged before Robb. "You shouldn't be angry, boy," he said. You should be thanking me. Robb's jaw tensed. You shattered our chance at peace. Peace, Karstark spat. There was never going to be peace. Not while a Lannister breathes. I just gave the lion the death he earned. You took that choice from me, Robb said. Karstark stepped forward, chains clinking. You think this war is won with letters and trade? No, this war is won with fear. You had the enemy in your hand and you played court. I ended it. You ended nothing, Robb snapped. You started something worse. The next morning, Robb executed Karstark himself. He did it with his own sword in front of his men. Just like his father had taught him. But unlike his father, there was no calm in his eyes, no strength in his voice, only weight. When the sword fell, something cracked in Robb that never mended. Tyrion stayed longer than he should have. Robb had offered him safe passage back to the capital, a gesture made before the field had run red. But now, trust was thinner than ice and the war had become personal. One night, Tyrion and Catelyn spoke alone by the fire. "Your son's war is lost," Tyrion said softly. "You may not see it yet, but I do, and not because of numbers or gold or land, because of anger." Catelyn looked into the flames. "It was never about winning, was it?" "No," Tyrion said. "It was about surviving, and we're all failing." She looked at him for a long time. "You loved your father." He didn't answer right away. "I feared him," Tyrion said, "but I respected him, and now he's gone, and I don't know if I should mourn or run." "Do both," she said. "You're good at that." Robb stood alone in his tent that night looking at the sword that had ended Tywin's life. Blood still stained the leather grip. He hadn't touched it since. Catelyn entered quietly. "You've lost their confidence." He nodded. "I know." "They still call you king," she said, "but they're watching and they're waiting." He turned to her. "For what?" "For the next mistake." He clenched his fists. "I tried to do what was right." "I know," she said, touching his arm, "but in war, right